There is a moment that never announces itself. No argument, no raised voice, no dramatic breaking point that anyone can point to afterward and say, that's when it ended. It happens quietly. One day, the most patient person in your life stops explaining themselves. The one who listened longer than they should have. The one who understood what you meant even when you couldn't say it. The one who stayed when leaving would have been easier. They don't argue. They don't demand closure. They don't even seem angry. They simply disappear. And what disturbs people most isn't the departure. It's the finality of it. Because when an empath leaves without warning, they don't drift away emotionally over time. They don't hover. They don't circle back. They are gone in a way that feels unnatural, almost inhuman, as if a switch inside them was flipped and sealed forever. This is where most people get it wrong. We are taught that empathy is softness, that kindness equals fragility, that those who give endlessly must somehow possess endless reserves. But empathy is not infinite. It is metabolized. And when it is extracted without replenishment for too long, the psyche does not negotiate. It shuts down. What looks like coldness is not cruelty. What feels like abandonment is not revenge. What appears sudden is actually the end of a long internal collapse no one bothered to notice. Carl Jung warned that anything pushed too far in the psyche does not break quietly, it reverses. What is suppressed does not disappear. It waits, then it returns as its opposite. The empath who once overflowed with understanding becomes unreachable. The one who once explained everything now refuses to speak. The one who endured everything now tolerates nothing. This is not a personality change. It is a survival response. For years, the empath absorbs what others refuse to carry. They hold emotional weight that does not belong to them. They translate silence. They soften cruelty. They repair fractures they did not create. They don't just hear words, they feel what hides behind them. Tone, tension, contradiction. The emotional static beneath every interaction. And because they can feel it, they believe it is their responsibility to fix it. This is the fatal illusion. The empath tells themselves, if I just give more, things will stabilize. If I stay patient, they'll eventually see. If I leave, I'll be the bad one. So they stay. They stay while their body begins to protest. Fatigue that sleep cannot cure. A tight chest before certain conversations. A hollow numbness where warmth used to live. These are not moods, they are warnings. The nervous system keeps score even when the mind refuses to. And at some point, often long before the empath consciously realizes it, the system reaches saturation. Something inside them stops reaching outward. They still show up. They still respond. They still function, but the connection is gone. Hope quietly expires. This is the most dangerous phase because from the outside, nothing looks wrong. The empath hasn't left yet. They haven't complained. They haven't exploded. So everyone assumes everything is fine. It isn't. What's happening is far more serious. The psyche is preparing an evacuation. Because when an organism is threatened with collapse, it does not argue with the threat. It withdraws energy from non-essential systems to protect the core. That's what the empath is doing. They are not plotting an exit. They are not trying to teach a lesson. They are not playing a game. They are conserving what little life force remains. So when the departure finally happens, it feels shocking, cruel, unfair. But the truth is this: the empath didn't leave suddenly. They left after years of silent self-abandonment. And when they go, they do not look back because what they are escaping is not you, it is extinction. In the next part, you'll see why this exit is rarely a conscious choice, why guilt cannot stop it, and how a deeper force inside the psyche takes control when staying becomes lethal. Part 1. The slow erasure before the exit. To understand why an empath leaves without warning, you must first understand something uncomfortable. The leaving begins long before the goodbye. What the outside world experiences as abandonment is, for the empath, the final stage of a process that has been unfolding quietly for years. A process so internal, so invisible, that even the empath themselves often doesn't recognize it until it's irreversible. Empaths don't experience relationships as exchanges. They experience them as systems. When they enter a connection, they unconsciously take responsibility for the emotional climate. They regulate tension. They smooth disruptions. They anticipate needs before they are spoken. They feel shifts before words change. This makes them appear intuitive, generous, even gifted. What it also makes them is overextended. At first, the imbalance feels manageable. The empath assumes the role naturally, without resentment. They believe that emotional labor is simply the price of love, that endurance is virtue, that patience is proof of character. But the psyche is not impressed by moral arguments. It keeps score. Every time the empath suppresses a boundary to avoid conflict, something erodes. Every time they translate someone else's behavior instead of confronting it, something fractures. Every time they excuse harm as misunderstanding, the nervous system records the injury anyway. This erosion doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like dullness, like waking up tired even after rest, like staring at a wall after conversations that used to energize you, like feeling heavy before entering certain rooms. These are not emotional reactions. They are somatic alarms. The body begins withdrawing before the mind allows the truth to surface. One of the most misunderstood aspects of the empath's psychology is this. They often do not feel angry when they are being drained. Anger would require self-prioritization. Instead, they feel responsible. So they stay longer than they should. They explain more than necessary. They tolerate more than is healthy. And because they don't protest loudly, the world assumes they are fine. But internally, something critical is happening. The empath begins disconnecting from their own emotional feedback, not deliberately, not consciously, as a protective measure. When caring becomes too costly, the nervous system reduces output. When empathy threatens survival, it is rationed. This is when people notice the change. The empath still shows up, but something is missing. Their warmth no longer flows automatically. Their responsiveness feels delayed. Their presence feels quieter, thinner. This is often mistaken for indifference or moodiness. It is neither. It is shut down preparation. The empath is no longer investing emotionally in the outcome. They are no longer imagining a future where things improve. They are no longer fighting for the connection internally. Hope has dissolved. And when hope dissolves, relationships enter a terminal phase. What makes this phase especially deceptive is that it is calm. There are no confrontations, no ultimatums, no dramatic expressions of dissatisfaction. Because confrontation would require energy, and the empath is conserving what little remains. The psyche understands something the conscious mind resists, that the situation is no longer repairable without self-destruction. So it begins pulling back, quietly, invisibly, instinctively. This is why the empath's exit feels sudden to others. The warning signs were not verbal. They were physiological. The empath was warning themselves. By the time they leave, the decision has already been made at a level deeper than thought. The emotional bond has already collapsed. The nervous system has already classified the environment as unsafe. The final moment, the day they pack a bag, stop responding, or simply don't return, is not the breaking point. It is the execution of a decision reached long ago. This is what people fail to understand when they ask, "Why didn't you say something?" The empath did, just not in a language most people know how to hear. In the next part, you'll discover why guilt cannot stop this process, how the unconscious overrides the empath's own identity as the good one, and why the departure often feels involuntary even to the person leaving. Part 2. When the psyche overrides the self, most people assume that leaving is a decision made by willpower. They imagine a mental debate, a list of pros and cons, a moment where someone finally says, "I've had enough." For the empath, this is almost never how it happens. If conscious will were in charge, the empath would stay. The conscious mind is bound by identity. I am the one who understands. I am the one who doesn't abandon people. I am strong enough to endure this. These beliefs are not virtues, they are bindings. The empath's ego is loyal to an image of goodness that demands self-erasure. It is fueled by guilt and reinforced by praise. You're so patient. You're the only one who gets me. I don't know what I'd do without you. These statements feel like appreciation, but psychologically, they function as chains. Carl Jung exposed a brutal truth. The ego is not the ruler of the psyche, it is a spokesperson. When survival is threatened, authority shifts. That authority belongs to the self, the deeper organizing intelligence of the psyche. The self does not negotiate, it intervenes. Long before the empath leaves physically, the unconscious begins staging a rescue. It often starts in the dream world. Dreams of collapsing houses, where the empath tries to hold up the walls alone. Dreams of being trapped in rooms with no doors. Dreams of screaming while no sound comes out. These dreams are not symbolic puzzles to be admired. They are emergency signals. They are the psyche saying, you are in danger. But the empath's conscious mind resists. They rationalize. They spiritualize the pain. They double down. They read more books. Try new communication strategies. Practice deeper compassion. They are trying to fix a structural failure with emotional effort. The self escalates. This is when the empath begins to experience moments of paralysis. Sitting in the car outside someone's house, unable to turn off the engine. Standing at the door, hand frozen midair. Feeling physically sick at the thought of another conversation. This is not anxiety. It is refusal. The body has voted, and it voted no. When the conscious mind still refuses to listen, the psyche does something drastic. It takes over. Empaths who leave suddenly often describe the moment as unreal, as if they were watching themselves from a distance. Words come out of their mouth that surprise them. Actions unfold without emotional commentary. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And then movement. This is not impulsivity. It is possession by the survival archetype. The part of the psyche designed to preserve life wakes up to find the house on fire. It does not stop to explain itself. It grabs what it can carry and exits. Guilt follows immediately. The ego panics. How could I do this? What kind of person leaves like this? I should go back and explain. This is why silence becomes essential. The empath knows something about themselves that others don't. Their compassion can be weaponized against them. If they explain, they will be talked out of leaving. If they listen, they will absorb guilt. If they engage, they will reattach. So the psyche removes access. No conversations, no closure, no negotiations. This is not punishment, it is containment. Jung described this as the psyche creating a third solution when two options become unbearable. Staying destroys the self. Leaving consciously feels impossible. So the psyche creates a rupture. A clean break. This is why the empath's exit feels cold. There is no rage, no emotional chaos, just clarity. The calm that follows is not peace. It is the absence of internal conflict. The empath is no longer arguing with themselves. And once that internal war ends, nothing external can restart it. In the next part, you'll see how this mechanism plays out in real life, in relationships, families, and workplaces, and why the empath's absence creates chaos in systems that depended on their self-sacrifice. Part 3. The places where silent exits happen. To truly understand the empath's disappearance, you have to stop thinking in abstractions and look at where this rupture actually unfolds. Not in theory, not in psychology books, but in the ordinary arenas of life where people quietly bleed themselves dry. The empath does not just leave people, they leave roles. And those roles tend to form in 3 environments where self-sacrifice is not only expected, but rewarded, until it becomes inconvenient. The romantic arena. In intimate relationships, the empath often becomes the emotional regulator. They absorb volatility, anticipate needs, and smooth over ruptures before they become visible. They are drawn to intensity, mistaking emotional chaos for depth, believing that love means staying present in storms. For a long time, the imbalance feels survivable. The empath tells themselves that relationships are work, that every connection requires endurance, that leaving would mean failure. The breaking point rarely comes during a dramatic fight. It comes during something painfully ordinary, a dismissive remark, a familiar criticism, a tone that says, "You exist to accommodate me." Nothing new is said, nothing explosive happens. But in that moment, the empath sees the pattern clearly, and for the first time, they stop hoping it will change. Hope is the last thread holding them in place. When it snaps, the bond collapses instantly. There is no confrontation because confrontation assumes repair is possible. The empath has already accepted reality. They pack quietly. They disengage emotionally. They leave while the other person assumes this is just another phase. It isn't. They didn't walk away from love. They walked away from futility. The family system. In families, the empath is often shaped early. They are the peacekeeper, the listener, the one who absorbs tension so others don't have to confront it. Their sensitivity is framed as usefulness. They are praised for being understanding, which really means compliant. For years, the empath carries emotional weight that does not belong to them. They excuse cruelty as stress. They rationalize neglect as generational damage. They learn to laugh at jokes that hurt because it keeps the system stable. Until one day, something shifts. It might happen at a gathering. A comment lands too sharply. A familiar dynamic reveals itself with brutal clarity. The empath realizes that their pain is not an accident, it is a function. Their discomfort is the glue. That realization is shattering. They don't argue. They don't demand apologies. They leave, sometimes physically, sometimes psychologically. Calls go unanswered. Invitations are declined. Access disappears. The family calls it betrayal, coldness, ingratitude. But what actually happened was an extraction. The empath didn't abandon their family. They exited a system that required their self-erasure to function. The professional environment. Workplaces quietly consume empaths. They are the ones who stay late, fix mistakes that aren't theirs, mediate conflicts without authority, and absorb stress without recognition. They feel responsible for the emotional health of the team, even when it costs them their own. At first, this feels meaningful. They are valued, needed. Then the imbalance becomes obvious. Requests increase, support does not. Responsibility expands, autonomy does not. Their labor becomes expected rather than appreciated. The breaking point often arrives during a moment of vulnerability. The empath asks for flexibility, rest, or acknowledgement, and receives guilt instead. Something closes. There is no argument, no outburst. They finish the task. Submit the resignation. Disappear. The system panics in their absence, revealing just how much weight they were carrying. But the empath is already gone. Because what they left wasn't a job. It was an unsustainable identity. Why the exit is so quiet? In every arena, the pattern is the same. The empath leaves without drama because drama is still connection. Drama still feeds the system. Drama still offers the illusion of influence. Silence ends the exchange completely. The empath is no longer trying to be understood. They have stopped trying to change outcomes. They are no longer invested in being seen as good, loyal, or reasonable. They are done trading their life force for approval. This is why the empath becomes immovable. Flattery no longer works. Guilt no longer penetrates. Threats no longer register. The hooks that once held them simply fall away. They are not resisting. They are absent. In the next part, you'll understand why this absence is permanent, why the empath does not return, why nostalgia fails, and why going back would require the destruction of the self that finally survived. Part 4. Why they never return. The question that lingers long after the empath disappears is always the same. Why didn't they come back? People assume time will soften it. That distance will create nostalgia. That guilt will eventually pull them home. But the empath who leaves without warning does not experience the departure as distance. They experience it as death, not a physical one, a psychic one. The version of them that endured the imbalance no longer exists. It wasn't repaired. It wasn't resting. It was dismantled. And once dismantled, it cannot be reassembled without violating the very instinct that saved them. This is where most people misunderstand the permanence. They think the empath is holding a grudge. They think the empath is being stubborn. They think silence is a tactic. It isn't. The empath's nervous system has recalibrated. For years, it was forced to normalize danger, to call tension love, to call depletion devotion, to call neglect patience. When the rupture happens, that suppression collapses. The body regains its natural intelligence. And with that intelligence comes repulsion. If the empath even considers returning or receives a message from the past, the response is not emotional. It is visceral. A tight throat, a racing heart, a turning stomach, a wave of dread with no story attached. This is not resentment. This is the body recognizing a pathogen. Once the psyche reclassifies a relationship as a threat to survival, there is no mechanism for romanticizing it again. The empath doesn't decide not to return. They can't. Returning would require overriding the same instinct that finally preserved them. There is also a profound shift in how the empath experiences time. Before the departure, time felt circular. The same conversations, the same conflicts, the same apologies, the same hope that this time would be different. After leaving, time becomes linear. They are moving forward, evolving, expanding, integrating. To return would mean stepping backward into stagnation. It would mean compressing their awareness, dulling their perception, and resurrecting an identity built on self-denial. This is why nostalgia fails. When the other person says, "Remember how good it was?" the empath no longer sees warmth. They see the cost. They see how much silence was required to maintain those moments, how much discomfort was swallowed, how much of themselves was amputated to keep peace. The memory is no longer seductive because the empath understands the invoice attached to it. And there is another realization, one that seals the door permanently. The empath recognizes that the depth they saw in the other person was not evidence of the other person's capacity. It was a projection. They were seeing their own qualities reflected back. The patience, the insight, the emotional richness, the devotion. It was never coming from the other side. When the empath leaves, they take the projector with them. This is why returning feels pointless. There is nothing to return to but an empty surface. Sometimes people manage to lure the empath back temporarily through guilt, fear, or obligation. When this happens, something chilling occurs. The empath returns, but the empathy does not. They are present but hollow, listening but unmoved, engaged but unreachable. The emotional bank is closed. This is why the empath knows a return would be dishonest. It would be a performance, a shell occupying a space where life no longer exists, and the psyche refuses to perform anymore. To prevent this, the unconscious does something ruthless but necessary. It burns the bridge. Numbers are blocked. Access is revoked. Paths are sealed. Not out of cruelty but mercy. The empath knows their own capacity for forgiveness. They know compassion is a vulnerability. So the psyche removes temptation entirely. The door is not locked. The building is condemned. When people say, if they really cared, they would come back, they misunderstand something essential. The empath left because they cared. And staying would have required self-annihilation. So they choose the wilderness over the coffin. Uncertainty over slow death. Truth over comfort. They are not punishing anyone. They are obeying the laws of their new internal universe, one where gravity pulls them toward wholeness, not sacrifice. In the next and final part, you'll see what happens after the exit, the solitude, the dismantling, and the emergence of a version of the empath that is no longer available for exploitation. Closing the rise of the sovereign self. The story does not end when the empath leaves. That moment, the silence, the disappearance, The sealed door is not the conclusion. It is the threshold. What follows is the most misunderstood phase of all, or one's, the wilderness. This is where people imagine freedom feels like relief, where they assume the pain stops and clarity arrives instantly. But the empath does not walk out of a burning house into comfort. They walk into open space. An open space is terrifying when you have spent your life defined by other people's needs. For a long time, the empath lived as a function, a role, a resource. When that role collapses, identity collapses with it. In the wilderness, there is no one to rescue, no crisis to manage, no emotional weather to regulate. This silence is not peaceful at first. It is deafening. Here, three forces emerge to challenge the empath's resolve. The first is guilt. Not healthy remorse, but conditioned guilt. The inherited voice that equates love with sacrifice. It whispers that leaving was cruel, that staying would have proven virtue, that self-preservation is selfish. The empath must sit with this voice without obeying it. And in doing so, they learn a brutal truth. Guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. It is proof of conditioning. The second force is emptiness. For years, usefulness was identity. Being needed was purpose. In the wilderness, no one needs anything from the empath, and this feels like annihilation. If I am not serving, who am I? This question cuts deep. But it gives birth to something revolutionary: intrinsic worth. The empath begins to understand that existence does not require justification, that value does not depend on output, that they are allowed to take up space without earning it through pain. The third force is doubt. The residue of gaslighting lingers in silence. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was the problem. This doubt is the final chain. And when it breaks, something inside the empath solidifies. Clarity arrives not emotional, but structural. They stop scanning for danger. They stop anticipating harm. Their intuition recalibrates. No longer threat-focused, it becomes truth-focused. They see people clearly now. Energy is unmistakable. Intent is legible. What once confused them now repels them. This is the moment the empath becomes something new. Not hardened, not cruel, not closed, contained. Their kindness now has borders. Their compassion has gates. Their presence is no longer free. They stop explaining. They stop overextending. They stop negotiating their own limits. No becomes complete. And this is when the final transformation occurs. The empath becomes sovereign. A sovereign does not seek permission. They do not plead for understanding. They do not offer their boundaries for debate. They rule their inner world with authority. This terrifies those who benefited from their self-abandonment. They accuse the empath of changing, of becoming cold, of losing their softness. But to a parasite, a healed body looks hostile. The sovereign empath does not argue with this perception. They do not correct it. They accept being misunderstood. Because they understand something the nice person never could. Being liked is irrelevant compared to being whole. Forgiveness also changes here. The sovereign empath does not forgive to reconcile. They forgive to release. They cancel the emotional debt and close the account permanently. Access is not restored. The lesson is not repeated. This is not vengeance. It is hygiene. And with this hygiene comes a final gift: repulsion. Toxic people stop approaching. Not because the empath fights them off, but because the empath's energy no longer offers entry. Self-respect is a frequency, and parasites cannot survive in it. The empath now builds instead of bleeds, creates instead of absorbs, shares instead of sacrifices. They no longer love to be needed. They love to be met. If you are the one who left, understand this. You did not fail to endure. You succeeded in surviving. You listened when your soul spoke. You chose life over politeness, truth over familiarity, self over role. And if you are the one waiting for an empath to return, hear this clearly. The person you miss no longer exists. They were consumed by their own awakening. What remains is someone you never learned how to treat. The silence is not empty. It is sealed. And in that seal, a sovereign life has begun. Your initiation is complete.